Hello and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Joseph Russo. He's a board-certified, Harvard-trained plastic surgeon in private practice in Boston for the last 33 years. Now, he offers full-service surgical as well as non-surgical cosmetic options, and he's a top 5 Allergan account, which is a pretty big deal, and a top 20 MERS account, which is a big deal. So in 2013, Dr. Russo opened Aesthetic Institute of Massachusetts, now called Aesthetic Mentor, where he and his staff teach doctors, nurses, and NPs the art of injectables. Now, he also supervises Medical Aesthetics Associates, MAA, that consists of nurse providers, and is building his brand to share his knowledge and support to others in the aesthetic industry. Now, he's also, if that weren't enough, medical director to several area spas and salons, and oversees a group of nurse injectors who work as independent employees. Now, Dr. Russo, welcome to Beauty and the Biz. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's so nice to finally meet you in person, sort of in person, and I appreciate the lovely introduction. And it's as you're reading that, I'm going, oh my God, that is so much stuff to say, but you got it all right. Thank you for doing that.
You're a busy guy. So I wanted to first talk about your own private practice and how it has changed throughout the years, and then talk about your business endeavors. So how about, let's just start with your own private practice. Can you just describe what it looks like?
Yeah, so I started my private practice in 1991, back then doing a sort of whatever I could get to keep my business going, but I covered like 5 different hospital emergency rooms, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, vacations, holidays, whenever. I was always available, and did a lot of, kitty cuts, facial fractures, hand injuries, whatever it was. And then slowly over the course of time, when cosmetic surgery was really still in its very infant stages, there really wasn't much to it. Don't forget, Botox is 21 years old, but I've been in practice for 33 years. If that gives you some perspective as to what it was like working what I call the dark ages. But I gradually transitioned and said, you know what? I really just want to do cosmetic surgery. So I made that transition about sort of 10 years in and never looked back. And so right now my practice is fully cosmetic. I have an operating room in my office where I operate 3 days a week and see patients on 2 other days. I have a fully functioning med spa upstairs where I have 3 nurses, 3 estheticians, and electrologists, and staff that supports them. So together we have like basically all the tools and instruments and toys you could need to run a successful practice.
And any other surgical providers?
I'm the only surgical provider currently, but I probably will be looking for an associate soon. I have been looking over the years, but I just really have never found anyone that I thought kind of syncs with my practice and my goals.
There's nothing easy about that. So if you don't have to, I wouldn't rush into it,
Certainly.
So regarding staffing, everyone talks, usually that's a typical big challenge in any practice. Any tips? You've been at this a long time and you've hired and fired probably more often than not. So
Yeah.
Any tips on staffing?
Yeah. I think, it always goes back to trust your gut. And, the old sayings, be slow to hire, quick to fire, is really kind of true. Over the years, I've had many exceptional providers, and I've had some really not so exceptional providers. And as I look back at it, the people that had stayed with me over the years, and I've got a couple providers, believe it or not, that have been with me for over 20 years. One of my original hires from 25 years ago is still with me today. And I enjoy that loyalty, and I enjoy that sort of dependability that these people provide. And I feel like we've grown up together, But over the years, it's easy to be sort of swayed and sort of hyper-focused on productivity and how good they are, what they do. If they aren't nice people, if you don't like them personally, if you don't feel like you would want to go to them as a patient, it's probably not worth hiring them. And recently I had to make a decision about like literally my top provider, who was like really very, very productive, but was just an awful person and was creating so much drama and difficulty upstairs, was a bully to the other providers. And so, over the years of trying to like turn her into a nice person, trying to do a lot of things to help her, I realized at one point that this was never going to work. I had to make the hard decision to fire her. And then in retrospect, it actually increased my sales, increased productivity, because we were like unleashed, because they've been held down for so long. So my basic adage is like, really, the person has to be qualified and have capabilities, But you can teach that, but you can't teach personality. You can't teach niceness. You can't teach being a nice human being. And those are the things I think you really have to focus on.
It's so true. I teach a lot of sales training, and I say I can train you all day, but I need that person that's got the innate ability to be empathetic, kind, compassionate, like just likes people. And I don't
Yeah.
know how you interview for that, other than say, so do you have any friends? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, how do you interview to find people's characteristics?
I don't really ever have a set script, what I'm going to say and what I'm going to ask, but I sort of just kind of start talking to them and ask them to tell me a little bit about themselves and like, a little bit. And at the end of the interview, I always try to get them to laugh or say something funny to see if they laugh, to see what kind of person they are. At the end of the thing, I just ask myself, do I like that person? Did I like that interaction? How did I feel at the end of that? Did I feel better at the end of it or worse compared to when I went in? And what happened? Did they drain all my energy? Was I having to like, ask every question like I was pulling teeth? Or was I just having a nice conversation with a nice person? And if it's the latter, then I'm like, that's good. That's what I want because I want my patients to feel like I've sent them to a good provider, and that it's the same kind of person that I am, and that they're friendly, caring, compassionate. And so that's kind of my test is like, as I'm sitting here, do I like talking to you? Do I feel like we're having a great conversation? And if that's like the first check mark, then we can go forward from that.
Right. It's funny. I think I'm really funny, and I will tell a joke during the interview. Not like it's not like a joke, but I'll say something funny.
Yeah.
And when I get the deadpan
Yeah.
zero reaction, I think, whoa. And then I think, well, they're very serious. And then I think, okay, just something to note, you know.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I just go by my gut a lot.
It's very telling because if you can't like we laugh all day long, if you can't laugh with us, then you can't really be part of the team, unfortunately.
I don't think you can do life anymore without a sense of humor. It has gotten so gosh darn crazy out there. I mean, you just have to laugh at half of this stuff,
Yeah,
just saying.
absolutely.
So I know you do a lot of non-surgical.
Yeah.
What percentage of your practice is surgical versus non-surgical?
Yeah, it's varied from time to time. Like right now I'm gone crazy more surgical just because the demand is there. At one point I was down to I would say like 70 to 80% non-surgical
Wow. Okay.
and the rest surgical. But now it's like I'm operating 3 full days pretty much a week. So it's probably more like 70-30, right? Surgery, non-surgery. But I've gone the full gamut. And I'll tell you what happened to me. You know, early, I was one of the first adopters of laser hair removal in the mid to late 1990s. And it was the Palomar Ruby. And it was like the very first laser designed for laser hair removal, designed by a company right in my neighborhood. And when we bought it, it was an 800-pound machine. It broke down every other week. It could only treat skin types 1 through 3. We had to have the air conditioning on in the winter because it created so much heat. And it was like this clunky, horrible thing. It made a lot of noise and it took up a whole room. But it worked. It worked. And you couldn't treat people in the summer. You couldn't treat people with tans. But the people we treat, it was very, very exciting, and they got a great result. And I started realizing that you could actually have someone do something in your office without you being there or without you having to do it yourself. And you could actually create an additional line of cash flow. And it hit me one time when I was on vacation with my family, and my office manager called me and said, Dr. Russo, we can't make payroll this week. We have no money in the bank. And I had to run home from my vacation and write a check for my personal account so they could pay the employees. And I started thinking, this idea of using another like laser hair removal or other devices and other people to create additional cash flow when I was away on vacation or just to augment the practice really stuck with me. And this was the mid to late 1990s. And from that point on, I heavily invested in technology. So we had all the laser hair removal devices. We had estheticians, we had electrologists, we had people doing chemical peels, we had people doing skincare, microdermabrasion. And so I very early on adapted to that and sort of said, hey, I never want to have someone come to my office and lose that patient because I don't provide a service that they want. I want to have a fully serviced, operation where in my practice we can cover every need that the patient has. And that hit me, like in the early mid 2000s. And a lot of my colleagues laughed at me and said, what are you doing? Like, why are you dealing with these nurses and training these nurses? And I started launching onto injectables because some of my nurses around 2005 to 2009 started getting interested in injectables. Up until that point, it was only doctors. And so I said, you know what? I think it's a good idea for them to start learning because they're going to do it anyway, and they can help me. They can bring in more revenue to the practice, right, by doing injectables. So we sent them away somewhere. I think it was Florida, and two of my nurses went with my office manager, and a nurse from Texas flew in to meet them in Florida. And there was one nurse teaching 15 other nurses in a hotel room in Florida. And then they trained for one day. My nurses each injected my office manager once. They each did half of her face. And they came home and they were like, "Oh, you're ready to go." And they didn't even know how to reconstitute the product. They didn't even know like the anatomy at all. So this happened a few times. My wife said, "Are you stupid or what? Like, why are you sending these poor women away? They're having to pay all this money. They're supposedly getting trained, but they're not. You're training them all anyway. Why don't we just open our own school?" And after about a year, we did because we realized that you can't go anywhere or do anything once or for one day or for one weekend and be a master at at injecting or anything really. So we started realizing you have to have continuing education. So that's how this MAA network started. You have to have follow up. You have to have people like who are sort of mentors to the lower end people and kind of everybody in between. So we started this whole concept of doing it. And my colleagues thought I was crazy. They were upset with me. "Why are you training nurses? You're taking money out of our pockets. Like, we need to be doing this." And I'm like, well, you know what? Nurses are going to need education anyway. And so you think if they say, "Oh, Russo's not doing it anymore, we're not going to become educated in this. We're just going to go. They're going to go somewhere. They're going to get a bad education like they were. They're going to hurt people. They're going to hurt the industry, and it's going to be a mess for everybody." I said, "Why not be part of it? Why not be a leader in this area and really take it and create a great educational opportunity?" And it wasn't until like 2009 and 10 when the economy went really bad and all these people who were laughing at me said, "Hey, can you teach my nurses how to do injectables? Hey, how do you do this? Hey, how do you?" And all of a sudden it became like, "Oh, Russo figured it out." Well, my only idea was I want to be diversified. So when surgery drops or when the economy goes bad or whatever, we have all these other things that can generate revenue. And that's kind of how I started by just saying, you got to be diversified. You can't be a one-trick pony, right? And that's kind of how it started.
Well, when I got into this, Palomar was my gateway into speaking engagements. So I was on their payroll and I was traveling every weekend to another city, and there would be a doctor talking clinical. I would talk marketing. And it's so funny because plastic surgeons were poo-pooing it, saying, "Oh,
Yeah,
please, all of this silly stuff.
100%.
I'm a surgeon." And then I thought, okay, but just so you know, there's a whole bunch of people, thousands of practitioners behind you that are going to trump you if you don't wake up and take some of this business, because they're going to take it away from you. And it just was so interesting watching
Yeah.
the industry change right before our eyes. And I used to be at conferences where plastic surgeons would never talk about injectables. And look how
Yeah.
much it's changed now, you
Now
know?
we've lost control of it. And now it's all at the mid-level, and they're trying, docs are trying to get back into it, but in some ways that ship's already sailed. Mid-levels have a very solid footing and they're good. A lot of them are very good, but the real critical point is education. That's the speed bump, right? It's hard to get education. That's why the aesthetic mentor is positioning itself. That's why we had this meeting that you went to last year, the MAP meeting, because we really think that, I mean, my concept behind the MAP meeting was, okay, look, doctors have their own meetings that they won't let nurses go to. Nurses have meetings that doctors won't go to. Med spa owners, people who are in the med spa space, have their own meetings. Estheticians have their own meetings. Everyone's got their own little silo, and they're sharing good information, but only with each other. Why not bring everybody together under the same roof? Business people, entrepreneurs, NPs, MDs, PAs, everybody, and share it all on the same stage. And that's what we did last year. And that's what we're going to do to an even greater extent this year because we're all in this together. We all have something to contribute. We all have something to learn. So why not put it together under the same roof?
For sure. That was a great meeting, by the way, the
Thank
MAP
you.
meeting.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
that was fantastic. That was one of many, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. We're hoping to just keep going. Yeah, and keep
Okay.
building it.
Let me ask you about lasers because you have dabbled in like all of them. Give me some tips because the doctors will call me after they've ordered a laser and they've installed it and they have no clue of what to do with it. What are your tips for what would be the right decisions to make to get the right laser technology on board in your practice, in your particular practice?
You know, we have a lot of experience and knowledge with lasers, and we also know all the companies very well. We know the technologies that are coming out. We understand it very well. But when you're starting out, it's daunting because these devices cost a lot of money. That doesn't even tell you about the service contracts that you have to have, doesn't even talk about the disposables that you have to have, about the people you have to hire to run it. So if you're going to buy a laser, you have to have someone invested in that device. You know, if you have all these devices and you say, well, anyone can use them and no one ever will, and no one will do it. Like, let me give you an example. Cool sculpting is not a laser, but it's a good example of a device, right? When you talk to people at Allergan, they're like, they have some really successful cool sculpting accounts and some really unsuccessful cool sculpting accounts. We have a very successful cool sculpting account. And the reason is that those practices that say, okay, Catherine, you're going to be our cool sculpting person. Anyone or everyone that comes in here can be a patient of yours. You have to convert them to a cool sculpting patient. And if you do, you get this revenue. Also, while you're doing cool sculpting, you can talk to them about chemical peels, about other services you offer. You can talk to them about the girl next door who does injectables, whatever it is. And when you are invested and you're like, you have a cool sculpting machine, you want to cool sculpt the whole world, right? So those practices become successful because that person and that practice are invested in you, will market for you, will sell you, will send you patients. They'll say, oh, you don't need liposuction. Why don't you just go do a little cool sculpting? You don't have enough to, whatever. Or you just need a little touch up. Why don't you go see Catherine for some cool sculpting? So if you're going to get a device of any sort, you have to have someone or, a number of people who really want to do it, who love to do it. A lot of people just don't want to do laser. They don't like it. They're not technically proficient at it. They're just unable to do it. So number one, identify a practitioner who really has a hunger and a desire and a drive to do it. Then number two, spend time learning about the devices, like which laser hair removal devices are the best. Why are they the best? What are the price points? Talk to people who've used them. See if they'll bring it into your office so you can try it, because they're all really different. And the other thing is, you know what? You don't have to buy new. You don't have to buy new devices because the cost of making these devices is really small. The markup is really high, and a huge amount of that money goes to the rep. Like, these reps make a lot of money on each laser sale, like a lot of money. So if you buy used, and it could be a year old to 2 years old, it could be some number of years old, but the prices are way, way less. These products all lose value very quickly. So if you're starting out, I personally would recommend maybe getting a used device from a reputable place. People are always upgrading their technology and getting rid of their old technology. And if you're just starting, you don't need $1 million laser. You just need one that works, right? So that's kind of like what I see, because I've made all the mistakes. I've got like lasers that are still co-racks, but I've also got lasers that I bought 20 years ago that I'm still using today because they're such great value and they still really work. They might not be the fastest, the sexiest, or whatever, but they work. And they've been paid off years and years ago, and they still create value. Now I'm at the point of like maybe selling those or leasing those to other people and upgrading to the new technology. So I would say to kind of go through that process and be sure that you have a dedicated provider, that you understand how these devices work, you understand why some are better than others. Talk to people who've used those devices, and and be sure they're happy with them, and then make your decision.
I'd also recommend talking to your patients and talk to your staff and find out what are the patient pain points that come up all the time and address that. Too
Yeah,
many surgeons grab that trendy thing that's happening right now. That
yeah,
Have you talked to your patients about that? Are you sure that's what they want? I personally would get a laser that actually shows results, real,
yeah,
real results, and
yes,
I would show them sooner rather than later.
yeah,
It's tough to sell somebody on something that they're going to look fantastic 2 or 3 months from now. Just go with an easy sell at this point, like a BBL or an IPL. Start
yes,
simple. Any kind
100%.
of anything that can reduce spots,
Yeah,
anything that can
yeah,
really show the result quickly. Just start there.
agree. 100% agree with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how much of your business now is this, like plastic surgery, like your practice, versus all of this teaching that you're doing? That's going to take up a ton of your time.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great question. So the Aesthetic Institute of Massachusetts, which became Aesthetic Mentor, because we want to have a national brand. So we have a school in Massachusetts, we have a school in Connecticut, and we're looking at some other sites around, and other people are interested in sort of working with us and growing us. So I used to teach every single course. Now I can't. We've got like 25 courses that we offer, all areas of aesthetics, including laser, other energy-based devices, all the injectables, all the different companies' injectables, Kybella, all the stuff that you know about. Um, so once COVID hits, and I would spend a whole day of my life, just teaching, for example, introduction to neurotoxin, spend like 9 in the morning to 9 at night, and then operate the next day. And once COVID hit, we couldn't do that anymore. And so I started to go doing Zoom meetings like this. And then I thought to myself, I'm doing these Zoom meetings, but I'm doing the same Zoom meeting every time. What if I just did one really good recording and made it on demand? So most of our courses now are on demand. hybrid courses, on-demand component where there's an exam that you pass, and then you come in and do your hands-on because there has to be hands-on, right, to really train someone. So now I'm going to the school. I'm teaching a cadaver course four times a year, like twice each quarter. I'm teaching a lip course, and I'll occasionally show up for something else. So I'm there like a couple times a month now, as opposed to like much more often. I just don't have the time because I'm trying to build this. I'm trying to work on my business rather than in my business. Right? Yeah.
Wow. What would you say is one of the biggest mistakes you've made in your career that you always learn from, but you wish you had avoided?
I think the biggest mistake over the years has been a couple of things. One is never saying no enough.
Yeah.
Never saying no, I don't want that, or no, I can't help you, or no, I don't think this is a good match. Kind of like always trying too hard to help people. Not that that's a bad thing, but there are many people I wish I had not operated on. There are many people I wish I had not hired. There are many devices I wish I had not bought. But I wanted to be a good guy. I wanted to help people. I wanted to do all this sort of stuff. So, unfortunately, you learn the hard way from a lot of those things. And I think probably ultimately I trusted people too much. I've been ripped off a lot of times. I've had major issues with people stealing things from me. And unfortunately, it's like as you go through life, you find you're like, at least I find that I'm continually disappointed in people. And I'll want to trust people. I like trusting people. I feel like I'm trustworthy. So why wouldn't everyone else be, right? But ultimately, that's been a big problem for me.
I actually used to say, I trust you until I don't. And frankly, that hasn't helped. You know,
Yeah,
I'm learning now, trust, but verify,
yeah,
and
yeah,
hold people accountable and know your numbers. For God's sake, stop delegating or abdicating some of this important stuff like the
yeah,
numbers. You need
yeah,
to know what's going on in your office, especially when it's somebody like you with a lot of pieces moving around. You're
exactly.
just rife for embezzlement, you know?
Yeah, it's all happened to me. All these
Yeah.
things happened to me. And when I first started, I didn't have a lock on my door. I didn't lock up my Botox. I didn't lock anything up. But now my office is like Fort Knox. You've got cameras, televisions, alarms, lock. I mean, it's silly, but unfortunately, it's by necessity.
Yeah. Do you have any like really creative embezzlement stories?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I've got one really bad one with a CEO who embezzled a huge amount of money for me, and
CEO did?
a CEO that I had in my practice who took control of things, and before I knew it, had signed my names on all these things, and I'm still paying off those years later. But I've had things happen to me like one of my nurses was taking Botox and going to a hair salon in Boston and injecting in the back room. And I went there for a haircut one time, and they're like, "Oh, it's good that your nurse is coming here." So, "Oh, she comes as a patient? I mean, comes as a client?" They're like, "No, she works in the back room." I go, "What do you mean? Doing what?" They go, "She's doing Botox. What do you mean?" I said, "My nurse?" It was like, "What are you?" Yeah, so she was stealing Botox and doing stuff like that, and you know, you're like, how did you think you were? And I wasn't going to find out about that at some point, but like we weren't really even like assuming anyone would ever do that to us. But kind of stories like that where people just steal and use it for themselves, sell stuff on eBay. I had a patient once that did this to me. Like she would always be like, "Oh, I'll be right out there. I just have to get dressed," and she would take the longest time to get dressed. And then one time, I was in my office and I saw her come in, and she went over to one of my cabinets and she opened my cabinet. She had like a bag, like a shopping bag, and she was emptying stuff out of my closet into her grocery bag, like medical equipment, sutures, and all this stuff, right? And I opened the door and she's like, "Oh, some stuff was falling out of the cabinet and I was just picking it up for you." And I was like, "Yeah, you need to leave before I call the police and I don't ever want to see you."
That's great. I'm always shocked at the audacity of people. That's crazy. I do know there was another like a laser tech, and she was in charge of inventory. Big problem. Never make one person in charge of inventory. There should be a check and balance on that one. She was ordering a whole bunch of cool sculpting the disposables and selling them on eBay, and just so crazy, right? And like just so I'm just the audacity
Yeah,
and
it's
the
shocking. I mean, I can tell you, so it is shocking to me, which, and there are people that you like that you think you can trust, and you just can't. You just can't really trust anybody, unfortunately. And I hate to even say that, but it's really true. You got to,
but right in
like you
front of
said,
your
you got to
face.
verify and have multiple people who are checking.
Yeah, good, good. Well, you'll learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about patients for a minute because you really understand the patient trends happening because you're in front of them rather than running, chasing to, catch up.
Yeah.
How are the patients different in today's world, the cosmetic patients, surgical and non-surgical?
Things have really changed. When I first started, people got old and tried to look young. And that's really hard, both surgically and non-surgically. That's really hard to do. It's hard to take a 67-year-old person and try to make them look that much younger. You can do it, but it never looks great. And as time has gone on, when I first started, all we had, when people came into me, I gave them two options: surgery or no surgery. That's all I could offer. We didn't have neurotoxin, we didn't have fillers, we didn't have lasers, we didn't have any energy-based devices. Really, very little. We had collagen, which didn't do great, some fat, and surgery. And obviously, as time has gone on, we've gotten these incredible other products and devices that have allowed us to treat people. And what's happened is we're now preventing aging, right? So it's people coming to us in their 20s and 30s saying, I'm starting to see lines here. I'm starting to see this. I don't like this. I notice it. So now we're at the point of like we're preventing aging. We're not reversing it. We're not taking old young. We're taking people who are young and they just want to stay young. So the trends have changed completely. And in fact, for a period of time, surgical volume dropped way down because people really only wanted to do these, non-invasive. But of course, non-invasives never really can get to the standard of surgery, and that's not what they're intending to do. And I think most of the treatments we do now are really meant as preventative, right? I've seen people posting about, oh, you can't really tighten skin. You can do all this stuff, but you can't tighten skin enough that you got to take someone who's old to make them look young. You can tighten the skin when someone's, gone from 20 to 30, and they say, I look older at 30 than 20. That's definitely true. You can start to see some losses. It works amazingly in those patients. And I think what's happening is we're keeping people looking younger. So, I mean, the generation after us will probably all live to be at 90 or 100, and you'll never be able to tell how old someone is. We've got people now who are in my office today who are in their 60s, and you're just like, my God, you look 40. But they started when they were 40 or 30s, and they just have continued to look great. So I think the trends are more like it's prevention rather than like correction. And I think also recently, I go back to the days when we were first doing like lip augmentation, and we put like palmaris longus tendon, temporalis fascia, fat, dermal fat grafts, anything we could find, we stuffed in lips, and we made lips way too big. And when we first got fillers, we made nasolabial folds and lips just like look like apes. Like we made people look really stupid because we didn't understand how people age. We didn't understand how to correct it. We didn't understand anything. We were out there by ourselves. No one had gone before us, And patients started saying, "Oh my God, I will never do my lips because you make everyone look like a duck, whatever." And then everybody's sort of brought it back down. Same thing is happening with fillers. You put fillers in the hands of these new injectors, and they blow everyone up, right? Their faces. I always say, if you look at someone and know they've had fillers, even if you think they were pretty well done, that means they've had too much, right? If you look at someone across the room and say, "Oh, I can see those lips coming at me," or "I can see those cheeks coming at me," or whatever it is, that's too much, right? Because when you look at someone who's truly beautiful, and I think you're beautiful, you don't just like focus on the lips, or you look at the person and go, everything works. It's beautiful because my eyes keep moving. They don't stop at any one point because there's so much to see and it all works. But if you look at someone and you can't stop looking at their lips or their nose or their breasts or their cheeks or whatever it is, it's too much. I think that message is finally getting through. I think people are understanding that, less is more. And we just want a natural. People just want to look like a better version of themselves, not like some morphed figure that you want to create because you want to inject 100, things of filler. That's kind of what I see changing as well right now.
I've had so many bad filler experiences. It's ridiculous. And then I gave up. I said, okay, I give up on fillers. If you're not going to do this right, then I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just going to skip it because I'm going to have nasolabial folds. I'm older. So
Babies have nasolabial folds. Babies are born with nasolabial folds. It's a normal anatomy. It
yeah.
really is. I mean, honestly.
It made no sense to me to keep puffing all of this up. And and you can really notice is in photos. I
Yeah.
would look at photos and say, I look ridiculous. And then but then I found there's a difference in injectors, and I don't know how you market that. We'll talk about marketing because
Yeah.
consumers have no clue of who they're giving their face to. When you find somebody who really knows how to inject, like really knows, it's a game changer. Like
Yeah.
that's how you look natural without
Yeah.
people saying, "Are you doing anything?" It's like, yeah, but I'm not, it's not full on surgery. It's a really good injectable treatment, you
And you
know?
hit on a really good point because, I've done a lot of training over the years. And what separates, an average injector from a below average injector to an above average injector to an expert injector
Mm.
is that an expert injector can get a really good result with a really small amount of product. Whereas the average or below average injector needs a lot of product to get you to what they think looks good. Because first of all, they don't know what good looks like. They're really not understanding the natural contours of the face and where the hollow should be and the shadow should be. But the expert injector can inject you with way less product, but get a beautiful result because they know where to inject it, how to inject it, how to get the patient the biggest bang for their buck. And if you're doing that with less product, you're going to create a more natural result, because faces aren't meant to be pillows. They're meant to have contours and shapes and curves and dips and areas that are heightened. But if you don't know that and you're just injecting randomly, you're never going to get a good result, never going to create a natural result.
Well, and it takes people like you to train others to do that because we didn't know that for many years. We just kept filling. Everyone just thought, okay, that's how we do this. And then everyone realized, wait a second, more is not better or necessarily better. So I'm grateful for all of you. Keep training everybody because
Yeah, yeah,
we'll
we're
just
trying
all
our
look a
best.
whole lot better,
Yeah,
a lot longer. And I'll come back a lot more often if you just give
yeah,
me a natural result. I don't
yeah.
I don't need you to fill me up for a decade. I'm just looking for little tweaks here and there to keep things fresh and no crazy. I just want a little refreshment, not an overhaul where people say, "Whoa, what happened to you?"
And the scariest place to ever be is at a meeting of aesthetic providers because you will look around and go, "Oh my God, was that a burn victim? Were they in a car accident? Did they have? Are they having an allergic reaction?" And then you say, so you're going to walk into a room looking like that, and then try to convince a patient that you create natural results when you look so unnatural yourself. Like what? Like, what are you talking about? Right? You know what I'm talking about. Like, you
Sure.
walk in and you go, I don't want to look like you. Um, so I'm going to go to another provider. Thank you.
Yeah. I want what she didn't have. Yeah. Um, back to your practice for a second. Have you also noticed regarding patient trends? Do they want, I feel like they're shying away from general anesthesia, back to surgery. They're shying away from that, a lot more IV sedation, like a local, less downtime, no nausea. Where are you at on that anesthesia spectrum?
Yeah, I've gone full circle on that. I used to do a lot of oral sedation, minimal IV sedation. So I'm gone full circle. I'm doing pretty much everybody with general anesthesia. And I'll tell you why.
No kidding.
No, I'll tell you why. Because I tried all that, and the problem with the like as a surgeon, you're responsible for someone's life, and if you're doing a procedure and the patient's uncomfortable, the blood pressure goes up, the heart rate goes up, the bleeding goes up, it gets harder for you. You start getting sweaty, they start getting sweaty, you get into this like downward spiral, right? You're not going to do your best work. You're operating under a pressure situation. When you have someone under general anesthesia, you control their breathing, you control their heart rate, you control their blood pressure, and they have absolutely no pain, right? One interesting little fact. I'll do surgery on somebody on their face or whatever it is, and then we'll do like an energy-based treatment, like a radio frequency with a microneedling with radio frequency or one of the ultrasound treatments. They were comfortable under general anesthesia having their face or breast cut open. When you use those energy-based devices, they start jumping under anesthesia. They're way more painful than surgery. So anyway, that's just a little aside. It always amazes me when that happens.
I would say if they will remember that pain forever. They
Yeah,
talk about men, but it's human beings. We will shy away from pain. So if I've had a really painful laser experience,
yeah,
I'm not dying to do it again.
right.
And I say all the time, you know what? Spend more time trying to figure out how to pain, keep this so comfortable that they are willing to come back again and talk about a good job that they had with, because their friends, all the first thing they're going to say is, "Oh, that's a painful one." How are you handling that? Pain with lasers is
Yeah.
a one.
So yeah, let me just finish that last thought because another thought just came to my mind when you were saying that. So when you have someone asleep under anesthesia, um, the the doctor's relaxed, the patient's blood pressure is under complete control, and you can do your best work without worrying. When you're giving someone anything less than that, like either you should be awake or sleep, because that in-between state is a danger state. When you start giving people intravenous sedation, you start just, depressing their respiration. And the anesthesia person has to be really aware, like, did I give too much, too little, or just the right amount? Because if I've given too much, the patient stops breathing, or, you start having to bag them and mask them. If you give them too little, they're still in pain. And I find that cycle is really scary. I think it's like, if you ask me, what do you want? I said, what, just put me to sleep, because I know you have me under complete control. I don't have to worry about waking up or hearing or feeling anything. But also, if you don't have a really good anesthesia person, you give someone a slug of propofol or fentanyl or whatever it is you're using, you have to really pay attention to their respirations. And most of the problems happen in that in-between state when you don't know whether you've given too much or not enough. So I personally think it's way more dangerous to do that IV sedation, because you're really dependent on the anesthesia person being excellent and really paying a lot of attention. And sometimes after a few hours, it's really hard. So I personally feel that full anesthesia is safer, assuming you have a good anesthesiologist, because it's all automated and there's bells and whistles and alarms and everything. The minute the person's blood pressure drops or their respiration drops, an alarm goes off and you have to look at it and say, oh, and pay attention. So if you ask me what I would prefer as a patient, I would prefer general anesthesia because I know it's safer. Anyway,
All right,
that's
that's
about
really
what you just.
interesting. Yeah, no, because I've had it done under both, and I preferred the local because I wasn't ill, and
Yeah.
I just got out of it faster, and I didn't feel a thing, and I didn't know anything that was going on. So I had a really good experience with IV sedation. So
Not that you can't, but I just think, like, overall, if you look at the larger numbers, there's more complications with that middle range thing. If you're at the end where, like, oh, it's just a small procedure and you do a quick thing, fine. But if you're involved with some of these more involved procedures, I think it's more dangerous. How to keep laser patients comfortable. We use all kinds of things. Topical, be it like benzocaine, lidocaine, tetracaine, or one of those kind of combinations. We use ice. We use Zimmers. It really depends on the laser. It really depends on how much. It depends on the patient, number one, obviously. Some people have a very low pain tolerance. Some people have high. It also depends on the technician. Like, some technicians are known for causing pain. Other technicians are known for going slower and really being compassionate and using these devices. I leave it up to the individual provider and the patient to come up with, and we have Pronox available, we have ice, we have BLT, we have Zimmers, we have whatever you need. So I leave it up to the individual technician and their patient to determine what works, but they can choose whatever they want.
have you heard of? I think it's called MLK. It's an injection that lasts about an hour, and then you can drive home.
Yes, I have. I have not tried it, but I have heard of it. Have you heard good things about it?
I have, and I think that's what I'm looking for. If I could, because it sounds almost too good to be true, but if that's the case, because another issue is when you're trying to get something done during the day and you have to go find somebody who's hanging around during the day and can drive you around,
Yeah.
it's just so convenient. If you could just be numbed for 1 hour and then it wears off and you're good to go, that's amazing.
That's a good idea. Yeah, actually, I should probably look into that a little bit more. But honestly, we've had pretty good results with providers who are very experienced, and they are pretty good at kind of controlling the patients and controlling the pain. But I think I will look into that a little bit more and see if that would work for our practice.
Anything to do with pain, we don't
Yeah,
want to.
agree. Agree.
Let's talk about marketing. Do you still have to market in? I mean, if you've been around for as long as you have and you've been in your neighborhood forever, by the way, I think you're marketing that big yellow house. Describe your practice. It's really fun. Is that
Yeah,
your practice?
so I'm the only doc there and downstairs, and I've got a couple exam rooms, operating room, my whole little group of people, and then upstairs we've got all these great nurses, estheticians, electrologists who are all doing the different things. They all kind of work with each other, so they kind of have fun. They like do little dances, they throw little parties. They're always laughing and enjoying each other. So they kind of market that fun aspect of it. But I mean, they're very serious professionals. They're very good at what they do, but they like to bring that sort of the levity component into it too. Sort of make patients feel comfortable. Like, hey, you're coming to our family. We like to joke around, but we're very serious about what we do. But we want you to be comfortable and have fun. It's kind of like that kind of approach.
That shows in your social media too. Are you loving social media or dealing with it?
It's a necessity. It's a blessing and a curse. Fortunately, when I meet a patient for the first time, I always go through their history and physical very thoroughly. But I also, on the first page at the bottom, it says, how did you find us? And I always say, so, Catherine, how did you find out about us? How did you find out about me? And I would say, 90+% all say Google. 90+% say Google. A couple have said other things, but you know, we put a lot of money into the Google because it seems like that's the first place everyone goes to find out about anybody, anything, anytime, right? But our social media stuff is all kind of like, you know, just spur of the moment often. So there's some planned campaigns, but if we have like a particularly interesting thing coming up, or someone says, I really want to push cool sculpting this month, we'll all kind of work together to push stuff in that direction. So it's kind of for us almost like a fun thing. We'll say, hey, we're going to do some filming this afternoon. What have you got that we can come and look at? Oh, I'm doing this. Well, we're going to just, take a few shots. So it's become kind of a fun thing, and it kind of brings us all together in a way to create more of a team approach.
Gotcha. So to wrap this up, you are very involved in your own plastic surgery practice, training others. You have your association. What's your end game here?
And also don't forget our MAP meeting, our big national meeting, because my real, I think what I want my legacy to be is like as an educator, because I think that's the most valuable thing we can give back. And I always say in class, all these complications that I'm talking about now, I know a lot about it because I've had every single one of them. I've made every single mistake that I've talked about. I've had every one of these complications. When you're around for 33 years, you have to, right? But I've learned a lot from them, and I want to teach you how to avoid those mistakes, because I don't want to see patients be hurt. I don't want to see you and your practice be hurt. I don't want to see the industry be hurt. I want everyone to move forward. So I'm sharing this with you because I want you to, I know where the mines are in this field, and I want you to avoid the mines so you can make a successful career and that patients are successful. So my goal has always been to be an educator and to kind of take it to the highest level. And I realize the biggest need in aesthetics right now is education, because so many people get bad education and so many people become like less than great providers, which cause complications, which cause complaints to the Board of Registration of Nursing, Medicine, DPH, Cosmetology. These investigators come out and they try to shut down nurses and mid-levels from doing this. They try to shut it all down because they're trying to prevent these bad providers from injuring the public. And I understand that. But if we don't educate people, they can't become good providers. And it's really hard to become a good provider and get education in the way things are right now, because if you graduate nursing school today, tomorrow you can start injecting people with no requirements for continuing education, oversight, having to do a certain number of hours to be able to perform them. This doesn't exist. And when I went to nursing schools and told them this, they were like literally shocked. So as of next month, I am launching the first certificate program in aesthetics in combination with a nursing school, Regis University here in Massachusetts, very good nursing school. Because I thought, this has to start at the nursing school level, because once they get out of nursing school, they're in the wild, wild west. They can do whatever they want. So when I approach the nursing schools, they're like, oh my God, we would love to be part of this. So we are going to do all the training, my school, Aesthetic Mentor. The nursing school is going to do all the marketing, get them in, and then they will be presented with a certificate of completion in immersion aesthetics. These courses are like 8 and 10 weeks long. These are like a full semester where they would take 5 or 6 courses. They would be shadowing people. They would be giving papers and presentations and actually learning how to do this. So that at the end of it, they'll say, hey, look, I got this certificate in aesthetics from Regis College School of Nursing. I've done 5 courses. I treated 60 patients. I've watched X number of hours. So something real credible that they can give to a potential employer. Say, look what I did, as opposed to the nurse who says, I've taken courses in different places and different times, and I got about 5 patients under my belt. And it's sort of like trying to go to nursing school, going to a different school every week, listening to different professors to say different things about different things, some right, some wrong. Then at the end of that saying, well, are you really a nurse? I don't know. Depends on. So I identified that problem, and we created the School of Nursing. We hope that continues on in a national trend. I hope my school, Aesthetic Mentor, can become a national name. That's part of the reason why I started this meeting, to get some national exposure. The other thing that's cooking, that's going to probably happen in the fall, is Allergan, with whom you know very well. I'm not boasting, but I'm just being factual. We are the number 1 account for Allergan and have been for the past few years. We are the number 1 account. And they have 140,000 accounts, and we're number 1. Because of our group practice kind of thing, this MAA, but they have identified us as the first Allergan medical affiliate in the country. So Allergan will start sending us people to become injectors. And we are like a pilot program for them, but they will send people to us, and they've been to my place many, many times. They've vetted us. They know that I've invented a lot of techniques for safety and efficacy so that we can take a person who is a school nurse that doesn't even know which end of the needle is sharp, and they can, within a very short period of time, become a competent, confident injector. And those techniques I'm really proud of. And, it's morphed over the years because as I've seen problems that come up, I'm like, how do I solve that problem? How do I make that nurse, the school nurse, and the ICU nurse, the pediatric ICU nurse, who's like incredible, how do I keep them in the same program, teach them the same techniques so that they, at the end, still have the same chance of being successful? And that's been the real challenge. So that's what I hope my legacy becomes, is just an education, scaling it to a much bigger level, because I realize that's the rate limiting step in becoming a successful aesthetic provider.
So forward thinking for you to catch them at the nursing education stage, like right at the beginning, catch them right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then catch them later when they're done being in the hospital nurse,
And I hope at some point we can actually have an aesthetic nurse practitioner degree, but
right?
we have to start small and work our way up.
Wow. Well, kudos to you. You're a perfect example of somebody who is, I don't know if you've heard about this book. It's kind of like your second act. I can't remember it, but it said like, you can't be a surgeon forever and ever and ever. So what other skills would you like to, and that's what you've done. You parlayed your skill and knowledge into something else, and that's giving back. It's servicing others. It's great legacy. I mean, God, you're doing all the right things. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate
So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, can you give us the websites of, I love your map meeting. Now, what do you know all the websites you have that people could reach out?
Yeah. So the Aesthetic Mentor is the school. And then
I'm sorry, do they have anything to do with Mentor?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't have anything to do with Mentor, but we figure like, what am I? I wanted to be an aesthetic mentor. I wanted to teach everyone in the aesthetic space. But my website, my email is jrusso@josepharusomd.com. So josepharusomd.com will get you to my website, Aesthetic Mentor, and the MAP meeting. You could just Google the MAP meeting if you want to come to the MAP meeting. But if you Google Dr. Russo Cosmetic Surgery Boston, I'll come up.
Yeah, no, you're not hard to find on the internet.
Thank you.
You come up right away. Dr. Russo, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure getting to know you better. I will see you again at the next MAP meeting. And this one's going to be in Arizona. Very exciting. And everyone, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So if you've got any questions for me, you can certainly leave them on my website at catherinemaley.com. And if you feel so inclined, I'd love a good review and have you subscribe to Beauty in the Biz podcast so you don't miss any new episodes coming up. And then if you want to DM me for any reason with your feedback or questions, please leave them on Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.